What did we learn in this module? Well, in this module, we finally access the data model. Therefore, we had a closer look at the difference between the query editor and this data model part. Both the query editor and the data model are part of Power BI Desktop in the end. After that, we had a look at relationships. Relationships allowed us to establish a communication base between different tables. We learned how to create and use these relationships. And in this context, we had a look at cardinality, so the relationship type, the cross-filter direction, which specifies the information flows between our tables, and active properties, which define whether a relationship is active or not. We then had a look at another difference between the query editor and the data model, the M language and DAX, the data analysis expression. The M language is part of the query editor. It's the code behind all the functions we have in it. DAX, on the other hand, is the code we write to create functions in the data model. And we learned that we need this DAX to be able to perform our data analysis. Therefore, we had a look at the theory behind DAX. We learned core concepts like the syntax or data types supported in DAX. After that, we had a look at DAX from a practical perspective. We apply different core DAX functions based on the concept of calculated columns. As part of this, we learned how to use functions like the calendar function and how we can access different parts of the information stored in that calendar, for example, to get access to specific months. We had a look at functions like divide, or we even had a look at if statements and related functions to be able to retrieve information from other tables. After that, we had a look at the difference between calculated columns, which return values for each single row inside our table, and measures, which return a single value in the end, which we will use in our visuals later on. Based on that, we had a look at the DAX basics now from the perspective of measures. Specifically, we had a look at the sum function, for example, and we learned important core concepts like calculate and filter and how these functions can be combined. We also learned how we can combine different measures. So we learned that we cannot only base our calculations on information stored in the table, but also on information that we create based on measures. And finally, we learned how we can categorize data to make sure that Power BI Desktop is not only aware of the data type, so text and number, for example, but also of the data category. We learned that this is especially important if we have geographical information, if we have URLs, for example, so links to websites, or if we have barcodes in our data. So with that, I want to conclude this module now, and now it's finally time to learn how we can create visuals in Power BI Desktop, because the dataset is ready, but actually we want to bring our data to life now.